What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Today it is a LazyDaze channel, and we're back at it again with some more history reaction for you guys today. And we're back on the 100 Years War content for you, and we're doing the Battle of Formigny 1415 by Kings and General. If you haven't already, please head over to his page. A link will be in the description box down below. We really enjoyed the last episode, and we're really looking forward to finding out what happens in this episode. It's the second from last episode, so we're getting close to the end. So
it's been a really good series, and finding out about Joan of Arc and that, man,
it was so good. And just crazy. Some of the stuff in the earlier parts as well. The fact we got
it's good to know. It's good to learn this stuff.
It really is, and like we said, it wasn't really sort of gone into that much detail over here in our British education system. Seems like I've learned a lot more history on the internet than actually in school.
I learned more from Top Gear than I did through school. Jeremy Clarkson, your power got me out of a ditch, I'll tell you that.
If you guys are enjoying our content, then please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, but we're just going to jump straight into this one.
Let's do this.
The era of great English victories by their seemingly invincible longbow armies finally ended with the watershed victories of Charles VII at Orleans and Pt6. In that year of 1429, the tide of the 100 Years' War finally turned. From that point forward, England's fortunes, both military and diplomatic, would start to collapse with remarkable speed, while the reinvigorated French under the Valois would continue to grow in strength. Welcome to the penultimate video in our series on the 100 Years' War. The death of Joan of Arc, the fall of Lancastrian Normandy, and the beginning of the end of the English invasion, culminating in 1450 at Formigny. The momentous coronation of Charles VII at Reims in the summer of 1429 gave England's regent in France, the popular and capable John of Bedford, time to brace Paris itself for an assault by the new king's inspired forces. When it came in late August, once again with Joan of Arc leading the charge, Bedford was prepared, and after a few skirmishes and a brief siege, the French were repelled. The momentum of Orleans had run its course, and Charles ordered his army away for winter. By this point in the war, Joan was becoming politically troublesome for the restored Valois monarchy, despite her role in boosting French morale in the dark decade of the 1420s. After continuing campaigns on her own for a few months, she was captured at Compiègne by the Burgundians and then sold to...
Joan made several escape attempts
on one occasion, jumping from a 21-metre tower and landing on soft earth, a dry moat, after which she was moved to Burgundian town of Aries. That's ballsy, jumping out of a 20-metre high tower.
The English in November. After one of the most notorious religious trials in world history, the Maid of Orleans was burned at the stake by English soldiers in Rouen, convicted as a heretic. At the time of her death in May 1431, Joan of Arc was only 19 years old. Charles VII...
we birthed a 19-year-old girl at the stake for heretic.
Oh, Jesus God.
But then at the same time, what do you expect when you're leading an army against us?
But just from the fact of 13, she had her first vision. At 15, she was battling. And then at 19, she
got burned at
a stake. Oh, and Charles made no attempt to save her.
Charles VII made no attempt to save her.
Bro.
But at the same time...
That's probably one of the biggest insults.
Why save her when she can become a martyr? A martyr is more I know it's bad, but like, how many martyrs have there been throughout history that have changed history? Do you know what a martyr is? Yeah, it's basically someone who's sort of I'm going to butcher the definition here, but in gist, it's someone who's been fighting for an order or a belief, and then have died for that belief, which causes more people to believe in that belief. And they basically say that this person is a martyr, this person is the one who died for the cause, and we need to do it for this person because they died for the cause. Again, I might not have gave the exact definition, but in gist, that's basically what a martyr is.
That's crazy though.
Yeah, so it's better for her to die there, for then more people will rally towards fighting against the English because the English killed Joan of Arc, who was their
I can't
martyr.
believe she died at 19.
I know,
though.
19. I'm not that
That's
surprised.
I would have thought that she would have survived longer.
I'm not that surprised. I'm not that surprised she got burnt as well. Like, it's the medieval times, you know. This sort of stuff happened all the time. It's a show of strength from the English as well. You know, she was the one that caused all these issues and them to lose so many places.
Yeah.
You know.
Military front,
I'm not justifying
Bedford
it.
managed to stabilise the situation by retaking a few castles, and this gave Bedford an opportunity to emulate Charles's propaganda coup of 2 years prior. On December 16th of that year, Henry VI of England was crowned Henry II of France as well. However, all things taken into account though, the war was not going well for the English, who no longer had adequate finances or manpower to defend its 350-mile-long line of contact in France, fund the modern war with gunpowder siege weapons, or maintain its many garrisons. It was only through Bedford's capability and love of him among the Anglo-French that the lands were maintained.
Okay.
Despite minor English success in retaking some rebellious Norman castles in 1434, the revolt continued to bleed the occupiers of much-needed resources, and their situation continued to deteriorate. Even more unfortunately for the English, their most important ally could see the way the winds were blowing. The dual monarchy suffered 2 body blows in quick succession during 1435. On September 14th, the ailing Duke of Bedford finally passed away at Rouen and was replaced by Richard of York. Worse still was the Treaty of Arras, signed on September 20th between King Charles VII and Philippe of Burgundy. This finally reconciled the feuding French factions in a settlement which granted the Duchy of Burgundy even more territory in return for Philippe's formal recognition of Charles VII as the French king. This political sea change had an immediate effect, as unrest began to occur all over the English lands in France. Moreover, the armies of Charles VII managed to capture the coastal towns of Dieppe and Harfleur, crucial for ferrying reinforcements and supplies across the Channel. Peace negotiations in 1439 failed, but over the next few years, England's position on the continent only got worse. Pontoise, the last English foothold in the French crownlands, fell in 1441, and the year after, Gascony was attacked for the first time in decades. Because a group favouring peace with France at any cost, led by the Duke of Suffolk, had great influence with the king in England, the latter led an embassy to Tours in early 1444 for a conference. France's delegates were unwilling to make any kind of compromise. The deal was in reality a desperate one for Suffolk. In return for an extendable 2-year truce, Henry VI would be betrothed to the niece of Charles VII, Margaret of Anjou, and England would cede men to France. Though the peace came as a great relief to English civilian settlers in northern France, who were on the receiving end of increasing French attacks, it was generally received with fury in England, and served as one of the factors which made the Wars of the Roses inevitable a decade or so later.
Let us know if you want us to react to the War of the Roses down below.
As Henry's realm started falling
apart, it was against the houses of Lancaster, which Henry is, and then the houses of York, which obviously will be up north. I believe. I might be wrong again.
Realms started falling apart. Charles made good use of the truce to embark on a series of military and monetary reforms which would forever change the feudal France which he had fought so hard to inherit. The taille, a direct land tax which had only been occasional until this point, became permanent and funded the king's changes. Feudal French armies had been hired by contract for centuries and usually went home at the end of the year. Starting in 1444, however, only the poorer quality units were discharged, while the better contingents were retained as the core of a new standing army. On January 5th, 1445, the French royal government officially announced the formation of Compagnie d'Ordonnance, regular units of troops.
The system was forefather of the modern company. It was later supported by the banders. I can't pronounce half of those French words.
The French are archers,
French archers,
militex and bands, infantry. I think standing infantry regiments.
So it's just basically
yeah. So it's like different.
Supplemented by bringing the highest quality bands of Routiers and Écorcheurs, many of whom were dismissed mercenaries, to the king's service.
Okay.
To ensure their continued loyalty, discipline, and relatively high moral standards, these new professional soldiers were paid monthly with the new revenues. Recruitment of former freelance soldiers cut down the amount of banditry in the kingdom, while also making use of an untapped reserve of experienced manpower. Other less reputable écorcheurs were viewed as an impediment to peace, little better than the outlaws which had tormented France for decades. Another vital part of Charles' modernization of the French army was his integration of modern gunpowder artillery, which emerged in European armies during the early 15th century. Particularly revolutionary was the development.
The rocket launchers we saw in the episodes prior, apparently they come from the British were having wars with India, I believe, and the Indians were the first ones to use it. I believe
that looks crazy.
It does look quite cool.
It's just, you got to think about it. It's the timing.
Yeah.
And just how.
But the gunpowder was about.
It's amazing to know that back then they could do things like that. That's crazy.
1445.
How do we have projectiles?
Yeah, we had projectiles in 1445. I don't think you sort of understand like.
I know the cannons and all that, but it's just like the smaller ones. Just like. I just find them little things interesting.
Yeah. Apparently, it was around this sort of era where people started trying to make cannons more diversified for a pitched battle instead of a siege.
Yeah.
So cannons were used for sieges, but not really in an actual battle.
Yeah.
So that's what they're trying to do now.
Was the development of so-called crumbled gunpowder, which didn't disintegrate into its separate components when moved, and was therefore far more reliable and far more effective. Other technological advances, including multiple powder chambers on breech-loading cannons, meant that newer cannons could have a surprisingly high rate of fire.
I see.
Enter the brothers Jean and Gaspard Bureau, sons of a merchant in the service of Charles VII. After being appointed to the task, the duo regularized the haphazard and sporadic variety of cannons currently used by inexperienced French forces. Proper usage for each type of gun was specified, and a greater level of training and professionalism was instilled into a previously relatively neglected arm of the military. In addition, the brothers used France's new fiscal strength to purchase standardized, higher quality bronze gun barrels. Larger bombards were retained for heavier siege duties, such as battering down castle walls, while smaller caliber guns, such as the culverin, would be used against infantry targets. In Normandy, and the formerly relinquished county of Maine, it was becoming clear that the Duke of York and his military forces in France weren't going to dance with the conciliatory tune of Henry VI's advisors. To them, it was inevitable that more territory would fall if the French weren't resisted now, and so the garrisons of Maine refused to leave their fortresses, such as the capital at Le Mans. This provoked threats of renewed warfare with France in late 1447, but the garrisons did hesitantly withdraw from Maine in March 1448, further diminishing the English position in now exposed Normandy. Soon after, York was sent to govern Ireland as a means of getting him out of the way, and was replaced in France by his great rival, Edmund Beaufort, Duke of Somerset.
Their rivalry was the lead cause. Okay. So your Lannister Rose, the Tudor Rose, and the York Rose.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a civil war. I believe Henry VI was a weak king. and was like sort of manipulated, and that's what also caused it.
Tension in Normandy finally came to a climax when the captain of Verneuil, Francois de Surienne, attacked a Breton fortress at Fougères with Suffolk's backing in March 1449. The town was badly sacked, and its fall prompted the then neutral Duke of Brittany, Francois I, to ask Charles VII for help. Somerset refused to apologise for his subordinate's act, and the French retaliated by quickly seizing castles at Pont-de-l'Arche, Géberat and Conches by late May. France offered to exchange Fougères for these towns, but was refused. This made the resumption of war inevitable, and it was finally declared at the end of July. Charles VII crossed the Loire in August and took personal command of the southernmost of 4 armies, which now simultaneously invaded the weakened English lands in Normandy. It was a total walkover. On the 8th, French forces took Pont-Audemer, and Somerset's other castles began to fall with alarming frequency, their garrisons having been consistently reduced over the decades. A few weeks later, on the 26th, the inhabitants of Mantes rose up against the English, seized control of a gate, and forced the garrison to surrender to Charles' troops. In September, Breton forces completed their conquest of the Cotentin Peninsula south of the Grand Bay and handed it over to French royal officials, while at the same time the Duke of Alençon took back the city which bore his name, which had been beyond the man's control for decades. On October 16th, the king's personal force, led by Dunois, besieged the glorious Anglo-Norman capital at Rouen. Knowing no relief was coming, Somerset surrendered the city in less than a week, and was allowed to march out with his garrison to English-held Caen. So driven were the French to complete the reconquest that their operations continued into winter, and they eventually managed to recapture the crucial channel ports at Harfleur and Honfleur. By the time Charles's offensive halted, England only retained a small area of central western Normandy around Caen and Bayeux, in addition to the Cotentin Peninsula's northern segment, with Cherbourg as its most important city. In England, 2 of the most powerful figures in the kingdom, Queen Margaret and Suffolk, raised a formidable army of 4,500 men, and the ships with which to transport them to Normandy. Sir Thomas Kiriel was put in command of the force. He was a veteran of the war in France and a Knight of the Garter who came from a family of middle-ranking knights, which for centuries had served the kings of England as sheriffs and in other similar roles. However, the expedition was delayed because of a lack of ships and the onset of winter. Worse still, when the army learned that their second installment of pay was to be postponed, they mutinied and killed one of the king's officials. Suffolk was widely regarded as the cause of the unrest through maladministration, and when he attempted to flee across the channel to escape his enemies, he was assassinated in May of 1450. Despite a false start to the campaign, Kiriel and his soldiers sailed from Portsmouth as soon as the weather in 1450 permitted, landing at Cherbourg on March 15th. These reinforcements instantly boosted the faltering morale of the English in Normandy, and led to Kiriel's army receiving a further 1,800 reinforcements from the large nearby garrisons. France's garrison at Valognes realized that it was in danger and requested support from the south, but Kiriel pounced too quickly, besieging the castle for 3 weeks before it finally surrendered on April 10th. The squire in charge of the fortification, Abel Rouault, was permitted to depart with his garrison, supplies, horses and possessions in return for the capitulation. After learning of the new English invasion, Charles VII sent some of his best units and most capable lieutenants to inform and reinforce his commander in the area, Jean de Clermont. Having missed the opportunity to save Valognes, he established himself at Carentan on the main road that Kiriel would most likely use to move south. There, Clermont sent word to the Breton Constable of France, Arthur de Richemont, asking him to move his forces to Saint-Lô in case Kiriel marched that way.
That kind of makes sense.
Meanwhile, the English moved slowly south, absorbing manpower, artillery and other siege weapons along the way. French scouts informed their commander that rather than passing by his location, Kirill and the English army were instead executing a potentially dangerous but incredibly well executed march through the low-lying tidal marshlands near the Grand Bay, which they accomplished on April 14th with only minor resistance.
I was going to say.
Local farmers and other peasants were supplemented.
He was worried for a second there.
I just had it in my head that he was going to get every single one of our lads along that low front, and then it was just going to change. And we were just going to get bogged down, and we were just
absolutely ruined.
We were just screwed.
Yeah, but lucky enough it was successful.
Thank God.
By a company of men-at-arms, but were easily brushed aside. Matthew Goff, one of the English captains, supposedly shouted at them, "Mad dogs, we crossed despite you." After successfully getting past the harsh terrain, Kirill's army set up camp for the night at a village known as Formigny, while Goff was sent ahead to Bayeux in order to get reinforcements. Clermont moved to close the distance with the English at dawn on the 15th, and sent another message to de Richemont asking to be reinforced. After receiving the call for aid, he too set out for Formigny early on the 15th, but wouldn't reach the field before the fighting began. At the English position, Kirill's 6,000 troops spent the morning hours constructing a line of field entrenchments made up of ditches, potholes, earthen palisades and sharpened stakes to block the main eastward road. Accompanying this was a smaller series of fortifications to the east of Formigny, where they had made the village a makeshift fortress. As midday approached, English outriders returned from the west and informed Sir Kirill that a French army was approaching. In a hurry, the English knight had Goff recalled from Bayeux. Realizing he was about to be engaged, Kirill drew up his archer-heavy forces in battle array. His own 4,500 were placed on the right side of the line, anchored on the village of Formigny, while Goff led about 1,500 troops on the left near the Val stream. Clermont's 3,000-strong army of men-at-arms, mounted crossbowmen and some artillerists began to enter the area shortly after noon, led by an elite Scottish vanguard company. When his forces approached the Val, they wisely halted about 600 meters away from their enemy, well out of longbow range. At a safe distance, the French forces formed up west of a bridge between them and the English, and for 3 hours Clermont's men remained where they were, while the general conferred with his advisors. The older captains cautioned restraint, while their younger counterparts urged an immediate attack before the English defences grew any stronger. Clermont, who would later be known as the Scourge of the English, opened the battle by sending forward 2 light culverins protected by a few hundred crossbowmen and men-at-arms. When the cannons opened fire, stationary English troops suffered heavy casualties from the unexpected artillery fire. Matthew Goff reacted first, sending 500 archers across the bridge to attack the small artillery position. They drove away the French gunners, captured the culverins, and killed those protecting them. Panicked by the setback, Clermont ordered a group of local peasants to scour the countryside south of the battlefield in order to find de Richemont. He needed reinforcements as soon as possible. At the same time, the French commander sent a larger unit of men-at-arms under Pierre de Breze to reinforce their beleaguered comrades and engage the enemy troops. Though this fierce melee started well for the French under Clermont, Kirill sent more reinforcements to bolster Goff's soldiers, and it began to tilt in favour of the numerically superior English. Official reports to the French king, written only days after the battle, later state that if Kirill's army had launched a full-scale attack at this point, Clermont would have been defeated. That attack never came.
Oh my.
As the clash went on in the centre, a small army of around 1,000 men emerged onto the plateau south of the battlefield. The English were jubilant, celebrating that reinforcements had arrived to finish the French off from the flank. However, as this third force got closer, the sight of French and Breton banners made both sides realize what was happening. Arthur de Richemont's army had arrived, and Kirill was now the one in danger of being hit from the rear. De Richemont rode quickly with his advance guard to confer with Clermont, while the main Breton force remained on the English side of the Val. This was tactically problematic for Kyril's army, but it is likely that his numbers still considerably outstripped those of either French commander. In response, Sir Kyril had Gough's smaller contingent on the left start to redeploy, pivoting to face de Richemont's army to the south. However, the elite Breton advance guard used the opportunity to fight their way across the bridge, slaying 60 of their English enemy whilst doing so, and disrupting Gough's redeployment effort. With disarray now the order of the day amongst his enemy's troops, the Breton constable returned to his main army and advanced northeast towards the English rear, while at the same time Clermont assaulted their front. Also at the same time, Pierre de Brezé had mounted a few hundred men and rode around the field, seizing control of the eastern fortifications and preventing any substantial retreat. Kyril did his best to rally the now disorganized and demoralized English in the village, but Brezé charged them from behind, while both main armies attacked from different angles. To make this worse, the town peasants rose up and joined in the developing slaughter. The main English army was totally destroyed. Only Gough and Robert Vere survived to lead their surviving soldiers back to Bayeux and Caen respectively. One group of 500 longbowmen withdrew to a garden next to the Val and were on their knees begging for mercy. Nevertheless, Clermont's troops slew them anyway. The English commander Sir Thomas Kyril was taken prisoner, along with about 1,200 others, while around 3,800 of the knight's men perished at Formigny. This defeat finally broke the back of England's military hopes in Normandy. Most garrisons had contributed forces to Kyril's army, and his defeat now denuded them of defenders. Just over 2 months after the triumph of France's armies at Formigny, it had also seized Vire, Avranches and Bayeux on May 16th. In June, Caen was besieged and taken a few weeks later. Charles VII rode north and ceremonially entered the city on June 6th. With only little resistance, the Cotentin Peninsula city of Cherbourg finally went down on August 22nd, 1450. All of Normandy was now under French control for the first time in almost 3 decades. It wasn't over yet, however, as Gascony still remained in English hands. The last episode of our series on the 100 Years' War is coming, so make sure you are subscribed and have.
I'm looking forward to finding out what happens in the last episode, aren't you, Jack?
That's crazy.
That one really, that was a lot of info, a lot happened. I really enjoyed it. It was just a lot. So much happened, so like all the time. It's so good. We are really enjoying this series over here. If you guys are enjoying our reactions, then please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we will catch you in the next video.
See you in a bit.